The Midnight Dreadnought was a legend long before the war began. It appeared in whispers among the fringe colonies, ghost stories told by miners, on asteroid outposts and travelers on desolate trade routes. No one could agree on what it looked like exactly. Some spoke of a colossal, pitch-black warship that eclipsed the stars, while others described an ancient vessel, scarred from battles that predated human history. The one thing all the stories agreed on was its name and its purpose. The Midnight Dreadnought brought vengeance. When the Zerkalan Empire began their campaign to expand deeper into human territories, those whispers turned into desperate prayers. The Zerkalan were ruthless, cold, and calculating insectoid beings who saw lesser species as resources to be harvested or annihilated. Outnumbered and outgunned, the scattered human colonies were falling one by one. Earth had already lost contact with a downstream worlds, and morale was crumbling under the relentless tide. But amid the despair, a transmission surfaced, fragmented, nearly indecipherable, but unmistakable. "This is Captain Elara Kane, Midnight Dreadnought, coming. Zerkalan flagship destroyed." The message, though brief, ignited a fire in the hearts of humanity. Had the Midnight Dreadnought truly returned? Could the old stories be more than just myth? The return of a legend. The truth was far more extraordinary. Elara Kane was the last survivor of an old war that humanity had barely survived centuries ago. The Midnight Dreadnought had been her ship, a prototype vessel built in secret, far from prying eyes, when humanity faced extinction at the hands of the Gralesh, a race that had once dominated the stars. The Dreadnought's construction had taken decades and the sacrifice of entire worlds. When the tide turned, it wasn't because of overwhelming numbers or advanced weaponry. It was because of a single ship piloted by a captain who refused to die. Captain Kane had been lost in a final act of defiance, launching herself and the Dreadnought into a collapsing wormhole to drag the Gralesh leader into oblivion. Everyone believed her lost to time and space, but Kane's fate had been more complicated. She and her ship had emerged centuries later, unchanged but adrift on the far side of the galaxy. The Dreadnought's AI had preserved Kane in stasis, waiting for a day when humanity needed her once more. That day had come. The Midnight Dreadnought was unlike anything in the galaxy. It wasn't just a warship, it was a relic of a desperate era, imbued with technology and purpose that defied comprehension. Its hull, forged from a material known only as void steel, absorbed all light, making the vessel appear as an endless shadow. It moved silently, slipping between the stars like a predator in the dark, and it held weapons, ancient and terrible weapons that had no equal in this time. The battle at Kara's Belt. Kane and the Midnight Dreadnought emerged from obscurity during the battle at Kara's Belt, where the Zerkalan Empire attempted to strike at one of humanity's last major supply routes. Human forces had amassed a meager fleet, ready to make their final stand against the overwhelming odds. As the Zerkalan ships poured into the sector, their sleek and deadly vessels blotted out the stars, advancing with chilling precision. The human admirals had prepared their defenses, knowing full well that it was more of a symbolic gesture than a strategic victory. But then, the sensors registered a new contact, an anomaly, a dark void where there should have been nothing. The Midnight Dreadnought appeared without warning, slipping between the enemy lines like a phantom. It seemed to glide through the emptiness, its black hole reflecting not a single ray of starlight. For a moment, the Zerkalan hesitated, confused by the presence of this unknown ship. Captain Kane's voice cut through the comms. "Command unwavering, to all human vessels. This is Captain Elara Kane of the Midnight Dreadnought. Stand your ground." The Zerkalan flagship opened fire, unleashing a barrage of energy beams and plasma torpedoes at the mysterious vessel. The human fleet braced for impact, but the Dreadnought remained untouched. It phased between reality and something beyond, reappearing closer with every pulse of light. Then, the Midnight Dreadnought struck. Massive energy lances, burning with a cold blue light, erupted from its cannons, tearing through Zerkalan ships with surgical precision. Where human weapons had faltered, the Dreadnought's ancient firepower obliterated, cutting through shields and hulls as if they were paper. The Zerkalan fleet, masters of war for centuries, found themselves at the mercy of a ship built to fight monsters beyond their comprehension. In a matter of minutes, the tide turned, the Zerkalan ships scattered, their formation shattered, and human vessels rallied behind the Midnight Dreadnought. Kane led the charge, guiding her ship into the heart of the enemy fleet, leaving nothing but wreckage in her wake. The Zerkalan flagship attempted to retreat, its command officers frantically issuing orders, but Kane had come too far to let them escape. The Dreadnought's main cannon charged, emitting a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through space itself. With a single shot, a beam of pure, condensed energy pierced the flagship, ripping through it in a burst of light and debris. As the Zerkalan fleet crumbled, Captain Kane transmitted a final message to all human frequencies. This is not the end of our fight. The Midnight Dreadnought will lead, but every one of you must be willing to rise. Humanity stands, not as conquerors, but as defenders. The Zerkalan will fall. Legacy of the Dreadnought. The legend of the Midnight Dreadnought grew in the months that followed. Stories spread of its appearances in battles where hope seemed lost, of Captain Kane and her relentless fight against the Zerkalan forces. But Kane did not seek to rule or conquer. She and the Dreadnought served as a rallying point, a symbol of defiance and resilience. The Zerkalan Empire, once arrogant in its supremacy, found itself haunted by a ghost from a long-forgotten war. They began to fear the darkness between the stars, where the Midnight Dreadnought lurked. It was not just a ship, it was a manifestation of humanity's refusal to surrender. As more colonies rallied and new alliances formed, the balance of power shifted. The Zerkalan war machine, designed to dominate, found itself unable to comprehend the resolve of a species. The Zerkalan counteroffensive. The Zerkalan were not a species accustomed to losing. When their fleet returned to the Empire with tales of the Midnight Dreadnought, panic spread through the ruling circles like wildfire. Their leaders, known as the Sovereign Triumvirate, were prideful and ruthless, but they were not fools. They recognized the significance of the Dreadnought not just as a military threat, but as a symbol. To the Zerkalan, it was a harbinger of something they had long thought impossible: human resilience. Determined to neutralize this emerging threat, the Triumvirate devised a strategy. They poured their resources into creating a new class of warship, Tormentor, a behemoth built with reinforced shields, advanced plasma weaponry, and the most powerful graviton anchors ever designed. The Tormentor wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress in space, intended to crush any resistance that dared to defy the Empire. But they didn't stop at the Tormentor. They deployed hundreds of infiltration teams to human worlds, seeking to destabilize the colonies from within. Zerkalan agents, skilled in subterfuge and psychological manipulation, whispered rumors and incited paranoia. They sought to unravel the fragile alliances that humanity was desperately trying to forge. Despite the fear the Zerkalan had of the Midnight Dreadnought, they believed they could break humanity's spirit through a mix of brute force and cunning. What they didn't understand was that the Dreadnought had not just become a symbol, it had become a rallying point. Humanity's leaders realized that their survival depended not just on military strength, but on the unity of their scattered colonies. The Siege of Arcadia Prime. The Zerkalan launched their counteroffensive at Arcadia Prime, a heavily populated core colony and a crucial strategic hub. It was a daring move only intended to crush both morale and military resistance in a single, decisive strike. The Tormentor led the assault, backed by a fleet of elite Zerkalan warships. As the massive Zerkalan fleet descended on Arcadia Prime, the colony's defenses scrambled to react. Arcadia's defenders knew they were outgunned, and many feared this was the end. It seemed impossible to resist the onslaught. Then, like a shadow emerging from the void, the Midnight Dreadnought arrived. Captain Kane's return was no accident. Her network of contacts and sympathizers had been monitoring the Zerkalan movements closely, and she knew Arcadia Prime was the linchpin. If the Empire broke humanity's spirit here, the colonies would scatter like leaves in the wind. Kane's voice echoed over Arcadia's comm channels. "This is Captain Kane. All ships, form up on me. We're taking back this world." The defenders rallied, their fear giving way to a fierce determination. They had a choice: face annihilation or fight alongside the legend that had come to their aid. And so, as the Zerkalan fleet advanced, human ships old and worn, coupled together from whatever the colony could muster, formed up around the Midnight Dreadnought. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The Tormentor opened fire with its devastating graviton cannons, intending to rip the Dreadnought apart. But Kane's ship, with its mastery of spatial manipulation and its dark, absorbing hull, danced through the storm of energy beams and plasma bolts. Every weapon fired by the Tormentors seemed to slip past the Dreadnought like a shadow through fog. The Zerkalan commander was relentless, driving his forces to press their advantage. Yet each time they closed in, the Dreadnought unleashed a barrage of its own dark matter torpedoes and energy lances that cut through Zerkalan ships with surgical precision. The human defenders, emboldened by Kane's fearless assault, charged alongside her, overwhelming the enemy's lines with sheer audacity. But even with Kane's leadership, the battle was grueling. The Tormentor's shields held strong, and its cannons tore through human ships with ruthless efficiency. Desperation began to take hold among Arcadia's defenders. Kane knew that the Dreadnought's legendary strength alone would not be enough. The price of sacrifice. Kane made a fateful decision. She opened a secure channel to the human fleet's command. "I'm going to board the Tormentor," she said. "I'll need a distraction." The human commanders balked at the plan. The Tormentor was heavily fortified and swarming with Zerkalan soldiers. It was a suicide mission, but Kane's voice carried a weight that silenced their protests. "I didn't come back to watch my people die in fear," she said. "I came back to remind you all what we're fighting for." With a group of volunteer-slate soldiers from Arcadia Prime, who had lost everything to the Zerkalan, Kane launched a daring boarding action. The Dreadnought fired a concentrated volley at the Tormentor's outer defenses, creating a momentary breach. Kane and her team slipped through, fighting their way to the heart of the enemy flagship. Inside the Tormentor, Kane faced the Zerkalan commander in a brutal confrontation. He was a towering figure, armored in dark chitin and radiating malice. The two warriors clashed, their battle a microcosm of the larger war outside. Kane fought with a ferocity born of desperation, knowing that the fate of her people rested on her shoulders. At last, she managed to disable the Tormentor's core systems, sending the massive ship into a spiral of cascading failures. With moments to spare, she and her team escaped back to the Dreadnought. As the Tormentor's engines detonated in a catastrophic explosion, the remaining Zerkalan ships broke formation, retreating in disarray. The siege of Arcadia Prime was over. The defenders had triumphed, not just through superior firepower, but through the courage of those willing to sacrifice everything for a chance at freedom. The dawn of a new era. News of the victory spread across human space. The Midnight Dreadnought had once again turned the tide, and Captain Kane's name became synonymous with hope and resilience. Human colonies, inspired by the tales of Arcadia Prime, began to rally together, forming the United Terran Front, a coalition of worlds, united not by a desire for conquest, but by a shared commitment to defending their future. The Zerkalan Empire, once a dominant force, found itself on the defensive. Their commanders no longer spoke of conquest with certainty. They had come to fear the darkness between the stars, where a lone ship prowled silent. The dawn of a new era. News of the victory spread across human space, inspiring not just hope, but a defiant resolve. The Midnight Dreadnought had once again turned the tide, and Captain Kane's name became synonymous with resilience and the unyielding spirit of humanity. Stories of Arcadia Prime stand against the Zerkalan, and Kane's daring assault on the Tormentor fueled a growing sense of unity among human colonies that had long been fractured and isolated. From the cold moons of Titanus to the deep space enclaves of Novus Reach, human worlds began to rally together, forming the United Terran Front, a coalition not driven by conquest, but by the shared will to survive and thrive against the darkness. But the effects of Arcadia's triumph extended beyond humanity. Alien races who had suffered under Zerkalan rule began to reconsider their allegiances. Rumors spread among oppressed species that perhaps humanity was not a reckless upstart, but a potential ally in the fight against tyranny. Even among the Zerkalan themselves, whispers of dissent began to emerge. The Empire's soldiers and commanders no longer spoke of human resistance with scorn or contempt. They had come to fear the darkness between the stars, where a lone ship prowled silent, relentless, and unbreakable. Captain Elara Kane, scarred but unyielding, continued her fight. Despite her injuries from the battle aboard the Tormentor, she refused to step back. She knew her journey was not over. There were still battles to fight, and threats lurking in the void that no one else could face. The Midnight Dreadnought remained her constant companion, a reminder of the battles she had survived and the future she was determined to secure. It was not just a warship, it was a symbol of resistance and the promise of a better tomorrow. Word of the united Terran front's growing strength spread like wildfire, reaching oppressed worlds and those on the fringes of Zerkalan space. As new alliances were forged and old rivalries set aside, the Zerkalan Empire found itself on the defensive for the first time in centuries. Their fleets, once invincible, now faced an adversary that refused to break. And so, with every battle won, the United Terran Front became not just a coalition, but a beacon of hope for all who sought freedom. Kane's legend continued to grow. She was no longer just a captain, she was a symbol that no matter how dark the night became, there would always be those willing to fight for the dawn. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, the midnight dreadnought sailed on. Its dark, absorbing hull seemed to blend with the very fabric of space, an elusive shadow that slipped through enemy lines and struck terror into those who opposed it. And as long as the threat of tyranny and oppression remained, Kane and her ship would be a reminder that true strength lies not in fear or domination, but in the courage to stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. In time, the United Terran Front's influence spread beyond human worlds. Alien species once oppressed by the Zerkalan began to join the fight, bringing with them their unique technologies and cultures. It was the beginning of a new era where old divisions were set aside in the face of a common enemy. Humanity, once fractured and alone, now stood at the heart of an interstellar coalition dedicated to freedom and the defense of all who sought it. And at the forefront of this new era, the Midnight Dreadnought continued its voyage, its name whispered in awe and fear across the stars. It was no longer just a ship or a weapon, it had become a promise that as long as there were threats lurking in the void, there would always be those who fought to hold back the darkness and forge a path to a brighter dawn. The Midnight Dreadnought would sail on, and its captain would lead it into the heart of every storm, unbroken and defiant, carrying the hope of countless worlds upon its darkened wings.